Hey everybody, so we're back again today with another review of the chapter from How to Read Literature Like a Professor. Today we're talking about the chapter When in Doubt. It's from Shakespeare. Before we go on, I want to just address some criticisms. A couple people said that they wanted my picture to be larger, but I already have a pretty big face and I will not allow it to be larger than this. This is it. This is good. This is petite and beautiful, so we're going to deal with it. Second, there's not a lot of light in this room because I like to be in a room that is as dark as my heart. That being said, let's begin. Alright, so first thing we need to know about Shakespeare is he is prolific. That means he wrote a lot. As you can see, he wrote 10 history plays, 12 tragedies, 16 comedies, and 154 sonnets. So next time you're very upset about having to write an essay that might be 2 pages double space, think of the Bard. Did he really? Yeah, I think so. Alright, the average person's vocabulary is about 2,000 words, give or take. His was probably closer to 30,000. Now, this is augmented by the fact that he made a lot of words up. A lot of words that we use today. About 1,700 are still used in our language daily. Words like assassinate, accused, addiction, cold-blooded. These are words that were not a part of the English lexicon until Billy Boy came up with them. So, yeah, it's very likely that he had the potential to write a lot of these plays. So, he wrote them. Yes, he did in fact write them. Alright, so now there's a group of scholars that are referred to as Oxfordians that suggest that his works could have been written by other people. Alright, like, Thomas Marlowe, even Queen Elizabeth herself might have done it, but I just don't buy it personally. They also say that he was a really good businessman, which allowed him to produce these plays, but he might not have actually written them. And yeah, he was a really good businessman. I mean, he was able to pay for a lot of actors and actresses, whatever stuff they needed to put on the performances, whatever advertising they needed. He was able to build the theater, build it after it burnt down again, buy stuff that was necessary, buy buildings, buy theaters. He was very successful in business. All right, and whatever you think, whatever they were, he certainly had the skills to pay the bills. Despite the arguments that the Oxfordians make, the majority of evidence weighs in favor of Shakespeare having written the plays. So we don't need to talk about that because ultimately it doesn't matter. For our purposes, it doesn't matter whether or not he wrote the plays. He can be a mythical figure just conjured by the figments of our imagination, and it doesn't matter. The fact is, we know the plays. I mean, anyone can use his works, all right? Like, there's no copyright on him anymore. It's been a while since whomever wrote the plays, Shakespeare, he can't really hold us accountable for, telling Hamlet or putting on Hamlet, which might be one of the reasons why so many schools will put on performances that are Shakespearean. Many colleges will. Many places do because it's free and they are awesome. They have beautiful language. They have compelling characters. They have intricate plots. They're very good examples of the best Western literature has to offer. Now, you've heard Shakespeare quotes all the time. I'm sure, statistically, someone in this class at some point is going to get one of those quotes tattooed, probably like "to thy own self be true," which is a stupid thing to get tattooed. I mean, regardless of what you think about tattoos, that line is like meant to encourage one's own egomaniacal tendencies. It's not as pretty as it sounds. There are plenty of great Shakespeare lines you can get tattooed. I won't go into that now. Anyway, so anyone can use his works, and they do. All right. In fact, there have been over like 350 different movies based on his works, or like straight up examples. There's like a Hamlet movie that comes out every couple of years. There's a new version of it somewhere. All right. Now, movies have only existed for like, less than 150 years. So that means that there's been a Shakespeare movie coming out like 3 a year. That's huge. All right. We get Shakespeare. We know Shakespeare. We recognize Shakespeare. We understand it. Like, as soon as you're reading plays, you're probably reading Romeo and Juliet. Nobody has never heard of Romeo and Juliet. Nobody has never heard of Hamlet. It's everywhere. Our culture is inundated with these stories. We recognize it. It's probably the most, Shakespeare's Folio is probably the most second read book next to the Bible, which is a lesson for another day. But authors are going to use Shakespeare stuff because we understand it. And that's called intertextuality. All right? How they use Shakespeare's work is called intertextuality. That's how one work of fiction or literature or anything is shaped by another. Authors expect us to recognize it. If you're writing literary fiction, you should assume that your audience is educated. And if you are educated, one of the standards, whether you like it or not, is a passing familiarity with the works of William Shakespeare. So what happens is when we write a play, or when we write a screenplay for a movie, or we write a book, in our mind, we're thinking about the plots and the actions that have existed in Shakespeare's time. Like, you can't write a suicide between two lovers without thinking about Romeo and Juliet. You can't talk about, someone arguing over rights to the throne or human rights even, without thinking about some of his history plays, many of which you probably haven't read, because we don't read his history plays often for whatever reason in the school. So be it. We can change that, but not today. And you test yourself against the writing that Shakespeare has. Okay? You don't want to write a to be or not to be speech. You don't want to write a to be or not to be speech that sounds just like Hamlet. So you have to do something differently. Many works of literature deal with those huge topics like death and suicide. So how do they deal with it without it sounding too much like Shakespeare? His work challenges us. Now, sometimes a writer will copy a lot of the plot and a lot of the action very closely to the original, like the West Side Story, which is the story of Romeo and Juliet, just a little more contemporary. And the action is very similar, okay? Like, Romeo and Juliet, they come together. When they're finally reunited, they both end up dying because of silly stuff happening. And the same thing happens in West Side Story, except Maria. I don't think Maria dies. I'm pretty sure it's just Tony. Sorry, Tony. Sometimes they go against Shakespeare's action. Like, sometimes they'll write a story that's inspired by Shakespeare, and it will go in sort of like a different way that's dramatically different from Shakespeare's original work, like The Lion King, which everyone knows that it's the story of Hamlet. All right? And, in the story of Hamlet, the king is killed by his jealous uncle, who takes over, and his son at one point is exiled, but comes back to retake the throne. Unfortunately, everybody dies. The king, the queen, the prince's friends. Like, there's a body count. All right, it's a Shakespearean tragedy. There's going to be a body count. Now, with The Lion King, it follows that a lot. All right, like Mufasa is overthrown by Scar. Simba is exiled. Simba comes back, overthrows Scar, but he lives, and there's peace in the land. Sorry, Scar. So in The Lion King, the story changes a little bit. And there are plenty of other movies and plenty of other books that do this, that either really try to adopt the story that Shakespeare was telling and kind of put it in a different setting, like, Macbeth in space. Or they'll do it a little more casually, like the movie with Heath Ledger, 10 Things I Hate About You. All right? Or She's All That. Or, like there's plenty. Forgive me. There's plenty of examples that you can find. All right? Like I said, there's over like 350 of them. So, why? So why is it that we study Shakespeare, and why should we recognize Shakespearean influences when it's apparent? Because of that intertextuality, what happens is an author can say a lot without really having to write a lot. All right? in Macbeth, there's a scene where Macbeth is about to do something horrible, and his conscience is really getting to him, and he sees in his mind's eye a dagger that's pointing in a direction, and the direction in which it's pointing is towards the bedchambers of a man he's about to kill. And this takes on a lot of significance. All right? He's wondering, am I on the right path? Like, the dagger is acting like a compass. Is this compass pointing true or not? Is this the best action I should be taking? Killing this person would benefit him and his wife immensely, but morally, his compass is broken. Other instances that we might see, it could be situations like, oh geez, I don't know, Hamlet's to be or not to be speech, all right? When we have, like we said earlier, people contemplating suicide, a lot of times they'll ask, like, well, what does it matter? Why should I be doing this? What's the purpose of being? If you say to be or not to be, everybody kind of knows what you're talking about. But I'm digressing. The point is that if I'm writing a story and I talk very, very briefly about a compass as a symbol, then that summons up instances in Shakespeare's work where the compass was a symbol, like in Macbeth. If there's a character contemplating his suicide and he's just saying, like, I'm not sure what to do. Maybe I should kill myself. Maybe that's the best way out, but maybe it's not. Maybe what waits on the other side of life is worse. That makes us think about the to be or not to be speech. And we think about all of the themes of that work. We think about all of the themes of Hamlet. We think about all of the themes of Macbeth. And many famous American authors have done this, like William Faulkner. All right, he took a line from Shakespeare, "The Sound and the Fury," all right, from one of Macbeth's soliloquies that takes place near the end of the story. And we have another famous American poet, Robert Frost. All right, he had a poem called "Out, Out," also from Macbeth. If you know Macbeth and it's the same soliloquy that Faulkner took his title from. If you know Macbeth, you understand what's going on. So immediately upon reading the poem "Out, Out" by Robert Frost, you know some bad stuff's going to happen, because that is a poem, a soliloquy rather, where Macbeth is confronted with his own mortality. His wife just killed herself, and his enemies are closing in on him, and he's just saying, what's the point? What's the point? Life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. All right? You recognize what the theme's about, and you can know more. The author is able to do more with less, because he relies on you being educated. And that's why we're here, to be educated, to understand the conversation that's going on. If you're reading something and you get a weird kind of feeling, and you're like, this seems familiar, it is. When in doubt, it's probably Shakespeare. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Don't be afraid to talk to each other. Make sure that you like, subscribe, click the bell, and until then, I'll see you later. Take it easy. Keep reading. Is that a good catchphrase? Should I have a catchphrase? I don't know.